Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you over here, Chairman Bernanke. Rather than ask you about the consequences of the actions you, the Federal Reserve, are taking, I'm going to ask you about the consequences of the inaction that we, Congress, are doing relative to our fiscal problem. The Chairman, the Vice Chairman, and the Ranking Member all alluded to some of your prior comments relative to our fiscal trajectory. What if we don't act? What if we don't set any long-term sustainable policy or projection, and that we run up a $1.5 trillion deficit this year, 1.6 next year, as estimated by the President, and north of $1 trillion, so almost somewhere close to $5 trillion in deficit in the next 36 months. What impact does that have on jobs, the economy, on interest rates, on everything?
Well, it's hard to know exactly what the timing would be, but what we do know is that eventually lenders would decide the United States wasn't a good credit risk, and interest rates would spike, and that would slow the recovery or slow the economy. It would create financial stress for not only holders of treasuries, but holders of other fixed income assets. It would have effects on confidence. It would cause people to expect higher taxes in the future. So it's hard to say exactly when the confidence gets lost, but we've seen in other countries, just recently, we've seen examples where, on Tuesday everything was okay, but on Wednesday there was suddenly a fear that maybe the process was breaking down and there was not going to be sufficient progress, and you saw sharp increases in interest rates and loss of confidence in that country's economy and fiscal policy.
So, I mean, over the next 3 years, it could happen, right? If we're running up that sort of towards $5 trillion, it could happen at some point in there that, as you say, no one knows exactly when the markets might react that way, but it isn't necessarily something that's 10 years away, is it?
No, it's not necessarily 10 years away. The way I think about it is that the markets are less looking at our economy, because we have the capacity to address these problems. They're looking more at the political will and decision making, and an extended period of Congress, and I know I hate to put this on you because I know these are hard problems, but an extended period of Congress ignoring or not making progress on these issues would be exactly the kind of thing that would create disruption in the bond market.
And that, as you say, the consequences are interest rate, people stop buying bonds, interest rates go up. We get into a spiral, don't we? Because the interest rates going up increases the interest on our debt, which increases the deficit, which increases the interest rates, which reduces, I mean, we potentially get into a spiral from which it becomes very difficult to recover without significant economic damage. Is that right?
Economists have a sterile term for that called debt dynamics, which is exactly what you described, which is that interest rates get higher, that makes the deficit higher, that makes the debt higher, that makes interest rates higher, and things kind of spiral out of control. That's right.
And so it could be, if we continue to, as we have been, to really not deal with the problem at all in any long-term or sustainable manner, then it could have a very bad fiscal result in not too long a time.
I've said that a number of times, and I agree with that risk, though again, as you point out, we don't know exactly when.
Right. I think, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your candor on this. It seems to me that members of Congress, politicians in general, are generally kind of risk averse, and that as we saw in 2008, when we were in the midst of that crisis, we seemed to not be willing to act to solve a problem until the consequences of that problem exceed what we perceive to be the political consequences of inaction. And right now, unfortunately, it seems to me that that in this town, the political consequences of action seem to be greater than those of inaction. But I think, as we did back in 2008, eventually we made people aware that the prospects for the problem were very strong and very imminent, and we increased the level of rhetoric we used in order to emphasize the severity of the problem, that we're going to need to do that to get this place to act, and I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has